A suspect has been arrested following a string of attacks on Asian Americans in California's Bay Area. We want to warn you, these videos are disturbing. To watch. Last month, a man was seen grabbing money out of a 55-year-old man's hand in a store in Oakland's Chinatown. Another video captured on the same day shows what appears to be the same man assaulting his 71-year-old grandmother. And here, a 91-year-old man was shoved so hard he was knocked to the ground. The attacks prompted actors Daniel Dae Kim and Daniel Wu to offer a $25,000 reward for information, and both of them join me now with more. Thank you both for joining us. Daniel Wu, I want to start with you. A report from the United Nations found that there were more than 1,800 racist incidents against Asian Americans from March to May of last year. What do you believe is fueling these attacks?
Well, the number now is over almost 3,000 now. And there's a combination of things, but I think a lot of it comes from racist rhetoric related to the coronavirus. And a lot of that has, we have taken the brunt of that in our community. We're being attacked on all sides. But there's a part of it is also being targets of crime, because elder members of our community are seen as targets and vulnerable targets and easy targets to attack.
Daniel Dae Kim, on Instagram, you wrote this, quote, "The number of hate crimes against Asian Americans continues to skyrocket. Despite our repeated pleas for help, the crimes are too often ignored and even excused." Why do you believe these crimes are being ignored? And what did you mean when you said even excused?
It's historically speaking, there have been a number of crimes against Asian Americans that have gone excused. I think specifically I'm thinking of Vincent Chin in 1982, who was viciously beaten and murdered with a baseball bat, and his killers have yet to serve a day in prison. So, we, throughout our history, from the Chinese Exclusion Act in the 1880s to the imprisonment of 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II, because they were considered to be enemies, because they were of Japanese descent, are examples of how Asian Americans have been treated as less than Americans. If you talk about the numbers skyrocketing, from March of last year to December, in New York alone, the percentage of hate crimes increased 1,900%. In Oakland and the Bay Area, just in the past 2 weeks, there have been over 20 incidents involving assault and attacks of Asian Americans, and often the elderly. So this is a growing problem. These are numbers we've never seen before.
And in fact, the District Attorney of Alameda County, California, launched a special response unit to investigate attacks on Asians, and specifically older Asians. And we also mentioned a suspect has been arrested in the Oakland attacks. Daniel Dae Kim, what's your reaction to that?
I think it's a great step. Part of what we're trying to do is amplify this issue. Daniel and I offered this reward for a couple of reasons. One, to bring this criminal to justice, but also to bring attention to this issue. For better or for worse, the ways that our platforms can work is to amplify issues like this. And I'm really glad to be working on this with Daniel. So, we're working to do that, and we're looking for help from our DAs. We're looking for help from our community organizers. We're looking for help from our legislators and politicians. This is what we've done is just one step in a multi-pronged approach, and it needs to be considered a long-term solution.
Well, our senior White House correspondent at CBS News, Weijia Jiang, asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on Monday about whether President Biden is going to do more to address these kinds of attacks. Here's what Jen Psaki had to say. Let's listen to that.
I'm not aware that he's seen the videos, but he is concerned about the discrimination against, the actions against the Asian American community, which is why he signed the executive order and why he's been outspoken in making clear that, attacks, verbal attacks, any attacks of any form are unacceptable, and we need to work together to address them. But obviously the executive order is something he did very early in his administration. It's still early, but even earlier, because he felt it was so important to put a marker down.
So President Biden's recent executive memorandum denounces xenophobia toward Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and the memo is designed in part to expand the government's tracking of these cases. But Daniel Wu, do you think that there is more the federal government can and should do to address these kinds of attacks against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders?
Well, I think right now that's a step in the right direction by acknowledging and recognizing the problem that we are facing and that our community is in crisis. And so what the federal government can do further on is reach out to community groups that are already in this space, have been doing this work for years, and find out more about how they can help.
Daniel Dae Kim, during those social justice demonstrations that we saw over the summer in the wake of George Floyd's death, there was a lot of talk and discussion about this idea of allies and people who didn't necessarily look like George Floyd speaking up and taking the opportunity to call out racism against Black people. In this moment, as we see these cases throughout the United States, as you pointed out, what role do you think allies can play moving forward here?
Allyship means so much, because if only Asian Americans care about Asian American issues, then we're really speaking in an echo chamber. And those of us who have been following these issues since COVID started have seen these kinds of incidents in our news feeds pop up almost daily, and yet we see very little being done about it. So it's really important that we have people from the African American community, the Latinx community, the white community, all of us working together. And I think it's really important to point out here that this reward was not meant to vilify any community whatsoever. This was not a matter of sowing division between one race versus another race. This is really about bringing a criminal to justice and helping a victim. And so, as we study this problem, we all know that it's much more complicated and nuanced than just one crime. And so I think at the end of the day, we can all unify around this idea that we should be able to protect our elderly citizens and try and create safer neighborhoods for all of us.
Finally, I want to ask both of you this question. The Lunar New Year begins Friday. Daniel Wu, I'll start with you. What is your message to members of the AAPI community looking to celebrate this weekend?
I think that the AAPI community has been scared recently, and that they're afraid to go out, even during the Chinese New Year celebrations, to go and get their preparations for things. But they need to know that we are standing up for them and we are fighting for them, and to have confidence in that we're going to make a change for our community.
And Daniel Dae Kim.
I would just say, be proud to be Asian. Be proud to be American. You've earned the right to be both. And we can all work together to be a united America. That's the hope, and that's the dream.
Daniel Dae Kim and Daniel Wu, thank you both so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.